Good afternoon, welcome to GrainTV. My name is Cody. Today is Thursday, August 13th. We had the markets moving higher here today after a very sharp sell-off yesterday following that WASDE report. Now, we did have export sales released out early this morning. There wasn't anything too exciting there to talk about, but we will break that down in terms of the pace that we're at and the pace needed to meet USDA expectations. Let's turn over to the grain hedge trading platform, see where we closed off the day. Corn futures trading up 5 1/4 cents, soybeans up 13 3/4, and wheat in Chicago trading up 9 1/2 cents on that September contract. Let's turn over the chart here and see where we're at. Of course, right now you'll notice 928 seems to be the level where we could see some resistance. It was a resistance back there in June. It was a resistance back there in late July, or excuse me, a support back there in late July. And now what we may be seeing is a roll reversal. So just be cautious here in tomorrow's trade. We had a nice rebound off of the lows that we printed yesterday, but I think we are in this sort of a retracement. We could find a little bit of resistance up here. This also goes for corn as well. You'll notice we're kind of bumping our head on that previous low that we saw back there in the beginning of August. So just keep that in mind during tomorrow's trading session. Let's talk a little bit about ethanol production, because we didn't get to this yesterday simply because the impact of the WASDE report was so significant. But let's talk a little bit about ethanol production. In average this week, we saw an increase in ethanol production by 4,000 barrels per day to a weekly total of 965,000 barrels per day. That is 86,000 per day, or barrels per day over the 4-year moving average, and 34,000 barrels per day over the same week last year. So in general, ethanol production continues to move ahead of pace. It continues to clip right along. We're about 4.5% over where we typically are during this time of the year in terms of cumulative production. So very positive there for weekly ethanol production. When you look at ethanol stocks, we did see a decline, down 710,000 barrels per day to 18,053 million barrels. Now, yesterday, the big impact here was, of course, the revision higher in yield. We watched yield for corn be revised from 166.8 bushels per acre up to 168.8 bushels per acre. And we also saw soybeans increase from 46 to 46.9 bushels per acre. So these are the items that caused a significant sell-off yesterday. I think today what we saw is a little bit of composure come back into the market, a little bit of a snapback here. But in general, our perspective over here at Grain Hedge is that if these numbers are, of course, the numbers that the USDA put out here in August, and we don't see a whole lot of opportunity for news to be introduced into this market between now and harvest to get any sort of significant rally. We are concerned that prices in the next, at least in the short term, throughout the next 2 to 3 weeks, are likely to be pressured to the downside. So that's something that producers should be keeping in the back of their mind. Now, we did get export sales out this morning at 8:30 Central Standard Time. What we saw is corn kind of missing analyst expectations here. Now, we didn't get the cancellations that we saw last week, but we were able to only book 29,000 metric tons. Analysts were expecting anywhere from 50 to 250,000 metric tons. So it was a miss and a little bit disappointing. When you look at soybeans here, able to book 96,000 metric tons. That is up from significant cancellations that we saw last week. So that's relatively positive, but in general, nothing too exciting out of soybeans. Wheat here came in at 429,000 metric tons. That was on the low side of analyst expectations and down 50% week over week. When you look at the cumulative export commitments here, you'll notice that on average here across the entire marketing season, we have cumulatively we booked 47.1 million metric tons for cumulative exports here. And this time last year, we were at 48.6. So we're behind last year's pace. And now you can see 47.8 million metric tons is where we expect to need to be to meet USDA expectations. So we have fallen behind analysts or expectations based on our models, and that's very disappointing. Hopefully some of the sell-off over yesterday will trigger some exports to show up in the next report here next week. When you look at soybean cumulative export sale commitments, we are at 50.7 million metric tons sold compared to this time last year at only 46.1. But keep in mind, Right now, we are exactly on pace to meet USDA expectations. This is exactly where we need to be. But the problem is, over the last couple of weeks, we've kind of shrunk some of those sales. We really haven't had very positive export sales. Last week, we had big cancellations. This week, a good 96,000, plus 96,000 metric tons. So as long as we can hang in here, we should meet USDA expectations. We just can't see cancellations next week. We'll have to stay tuned to see what comes down the pipe. In terms of new crop here, you'll notice we saw 501,000 metric tons sold for corn. That was on the high side of analysts' expectations and up from 277,000 metric tons last week. So new crop sales were very positive there. New crop sales for soybeans was down from last week, but it was on the high side of analysts' expectations, booking 660,000 metric tons. Guys, that pretty much wraps up today's show. You can see here that new crop sales, one thing I just wanted to do, show you quickly, is that new crop sales are behind pace. Soybeans are about 63% sold compared to where we are on average during this time of the week, the 4-year moving average. So corn's only 59% of where we typically are. So export sales for new crop is continuing to run behind pace. And that is certainly not a very positive driver here to the bullish story. When you look at the weather outlook, we also have in the 6 to 10 and the 8 to 14 day forecast additional moisture coming into the Midwest, and this should offer relief to some of the areas that have been a little bit dry here over the last 3 weeks. So guys, when you look at this, we have a negative USDA WASDE report released yesterday. We have ample moisture here in the forecast. We have export sales which are behind pace right now for the new crop. This all to me is a bit concerning, and I think that probably over the next 3 weeks it's likely that we continue to see some pressure to the downside despite the fact that we had a bit of a rebound here today. So perhaps use some of these rebounds as an opportunity to try and protect some further downside. If you want to talk to us about that and just get a sense as to what the pluses and minuses are, what your risks are, do give the office a call. The number is 877-472-4607. And if you haven't done so already, take a demo of that 14-day free trial. See what it's like to have live quotes in the palm of your hand, and see what it's like to have a desktop platform where you can easily execute trades in the day and night session. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll see you here Friday for the weekly wrap-up.